What motivates a buyer throughout the phases of their customer journey? And how can marketers help every step of the way? Let's go behind the click in this episode of Closing Time. Thanks for tuning into Closing Time, the show for go-to-market leaders. I'm Val Riley, VP of Marketing for Unbounce and Insightly. Today, I'm joined by Jon MacDonald. He is founder of The Good, a digital experience optimization firm, and he's also author of the book Behind the Click. Welcome, Jon.
Thanks for having me today.
Jon, I'm fascinated with the book, so I'd like to go deeper into a few key topics from it about the customer journey. The first one I found super intriguing was talking about the mental shortcuts that our brains use as consumers to navigate the vast amount of information we encounter every day. Yeah. Why is it so important for digital marketers to understand this?
Well, these mental shortcuts, they're what psychologists might call heuristics, are absolutely fundamental to understanding customer behavior online. And that was a big reason I wrote the book, because it's actually staggering when you think about it. Our brains are taking in roughly 11 million bits of information every second. It is so much. It can be overwhelming, but we can only consciously process about 40 to 50 bits of that. So that's less than 0.0005% of what's happening around us. So this has massive implications for digital marketers. And I find that most aren't taking that into consideration. But when customers land on your website, they're not carefully analyzing every word, image, or design element, no matter how much the marketing team wants you to believe that. They're using these mental shortcuts to quickly determine things like, is this what I'm looking for? Do I trust this company? Can I find what I need? Right? So in the book, I explore how these shortcuts really affect that entire customer journey. Right? So for instance, I cover one called the anchoring bias. And this is the first impression a customer has. And that sets the tone for their entire experience moving forward from there. So if your site takes more than like 3 seconds to load, or maybe it has a confusing layout, or you've already created a negative anchor, that's incredibly difficult to really overcome that moving forward. So understanding these shortcuts, it's not about manipulating customers, right? I want to make that clear. I always like to state that up front, because yes, you could use these for, we'll call them like black hat techniques, right? But really, it's about aligning your goals with your customers' goals. So removing friction, aligning that digital experience with how people naturally think and make decisions. And then when you work with these mental models instead of against them, you also create experiences that feel really intuitive and trustworthy. Right? So that's why I structured this entire book around these psychological principles, because they're that foundation of effective digital marketing.
I'm just zoning in on your data point about how long it takes a site to load. I'm amazed at my own level of impatience. So really, that is a true indicator of whether I'm going to stick around or not. And again, with the data points, just knowing that, if a human is only going to really process 40 or 50 bits, even the fact that you've caught their attention and on any level as a digital marketer really is a win.
Yeah. Right, 100%. And I think that's why you have to have this alignment between the messaging and what drove them to click on that ad or follow a link to your site. There needs to be alignment between the expectation that was set up front and what your site is delivering.
Well, let's kind of continue down that path, that customer journey path, because after you've gotten their attention, right, they go into a discovery phase and they've got the initial impressions of your company, which you've talked about a little bit. So what do digital marketers really need to get right at that point?
Yeah, great question. Because I break it down by these phases, right, of that customer journey. And the discovery phase is really critical. Obviously, it's the first phase, but you only get one shot at it, right? And so I think your example around, somebody was intrigued enough to click on an ad or come to your site makes a lot of sense there. But research shows that users can determine whether a website is right for them in just half a second. So you have half a second. So again, if your site takes 3 seconds to load, you've already lost them, right? But that first impression, anchoring bias, is really going to stick around because that is something that is really often overlooked. And so I believe digital marketers need to focus on a few key elements within this discovery phase. First, they need to make it all about the customer, not the company. I see too many people lead with their company history or mission when customers are there to solve their own problem. They don't care about your story yet. It could be important, but upfront, they are only at your site for 2 reasons. And these are the only 2 reasons. And that's because they have a pain or a need and they think that you can help solve them. And they want to determine that and then convert as quickly and easily as possible and get on with their lives. So again, your journey and the consumer's journey are really aligned here, right? But your customers really need to understand their problem, need to know that you understand their problem and that you have a solution for them. So secondly, during this phase, I really believe you should invest in good design, but that doesn't mean beautiful. Okay. And I think that's the big difference here between what you might hear that design matters. Design can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people, right? But the site needs to be clean and trustworthy and above all, just functional, right? I tell companies that they often think they need about a 9 out of 10 on the design when really they need a 9 out of 10 on functional design, right? And only about a 4 out of 10 to earn enough trust in that visual design, right? You look at Amazon, it's not a pretty site, but it's trustworthy and it's functional, right? So anything higher than that 4 out of 10 is a bonus, but too many brands, especially I see this in direct to consumer brands, DTC brands, where they feel like they have to have a beautiful experience to set them apart. But this also kind of going into the next thing, which is mobile optimization. It's really a critical element. And if your site's too beautiful, it often is not very functional on mobile either. About 34% at the time I wrote this book, which is, about the time I did the research was about a year ago or so, but about 34% of consumers prefer shopping on mobile over any other channel. And if they have that negative reaction or negative experience on mobile, they're going to get 62% less likely to purchase from you in the future.
Wow.
So not only are you eliminating a third of your possible audience by not really focusing on mobile experience, but over half of that third is not going to purchase from you in the future either and even give you a second shot. So the last thing is I caution in the book, don't lead with sales and discounts during discovery. Too many folks will immediately have a pop-up offering a discount or, a trade for give me your email, sign up for the email. Here's the problem is that first impression you're making is a discount impression. What I mean by that is you're devaluing your brand and your product. So instead, you really want to focus on communicating your full value and instead of thinking about a dollar or percentage off that you can provide to move people over that line.
That's a tactic you see so frequently. So it's a really interesting point of view to bring up. I'd like to kind of hijack a Google announcement that came out February of this year. It was really doubling down on kind of something you just shared about the quality of the experience when you click on a Google ad and then kind of get into the funnel of that Google ad. The specific article, we can link it in the show notes, but it was basically saying you have to have a landing page that's easily navigable, that really responds to the search ad that you've put out there, or else, as a digital marketer, you're just going to be out of luck. Can you talk a little bit about what you feel like Google was getting at there?
Well, I think that there's a couple of things in reading that article that really stood out to me. The first is that Google's just reinforcing what savvy digital marketers have known all along, is that user experience is paramount, right? So I think it's interesting. They keep hitting on that same point from different angles, hoping that people will listen and it will get through, right? But it's no coincidence that Google's emphasis aligns perfectly with what I've been talking about in Behind the Click, because according to that own blog post, right? Users click on a search ad. They expect a seamless transition to content that fulfills their need. And the journey from the search query to the landing page must feel cohesive and logical. I have it up right here. I was just reading that paragraph. It's really interesting because Google understands that clear navigation and a logical page structure are going to be crucial for users to find what they're looking for quickly, and it's going to lead to a better satisfaction around Google. I also found it really interesting, though, that the example they had in the article was around a login button. So most people are running Google ads to get net new customers. So it's been tradition to have a landing page that keeps people on that landing page, right? But if it's a current customer and they cycle back to Google, Google knows that somebody clicked the link and came right back to Google. So I find it interesting because that's where Google and marketers might be at odds. I understand not wanting to spend your money for current customers to drive awareness for them only to click your ad and then immediately go to the login page. It seems like wasted money. So I get that frustration point from brands. And if I was Google, I probably wouldn't have used login as the example, but I get where they're coming from to some degree. So, but all in all, Google's emphasis is pretty simple, right? They want you to deliver value to users. And if you're clicking on a search result that is confusing and difficult to navigate, it's going to reflect really poorly on Google, right, and their search quality. So I think they said something around 76% of searchers are more likely to abandon sites with poor navigation. That's a staggering statistic. 3/4 of your users could just disappear because you have a bad navigation.
We talk in marketing about putting people into a funnel, and if you think about that, we are trying to make it as easy as possible for that customer to convert, right? That funnel, like we're bringing them in and we're guiding them along, and then you hear that statistic that 44% of ad traffic still just goes to a generic website and not like a dedicated funnel landing page experience. And I just want to say, like, at this point, Google has, as you have indicated, said it multiple times. What would you say to a digital marketer who just is not using a dedicated funnel per campaign at this point? Like, is it time to just, hang it up?
It might be, because you're potentially wasting a significant portion of your ad budget. And the reality is, in these times of uncertainty and economic situations, especially in the United States, but spreading across the globe right now, that's just unacceptable for a marketer, right? They're going to be scrutinized more than ever, and you need to make sure that spend is as effective as possible. So when you drive traffic from different campaigns to generic web pages, rather than that dedicated funnel, you're essentially asking customers to figure out their own path. Super annoying for consumers, right? It's like inviting someone to dinner, but not telling them what house is yours. They may eventually find it, but they're going to get a large portion are going to get up and go home hungry. It's unfortunate, but true. So I talk extensively in the book as well about decision fatigue and how every additional choice you put in front of a consumer decreases that likelihood that they're going to convert. And when somebody clicks on a specific ad, they have a specific intent. Right? As I mentioned earlier, something intrigued them enough to click on that. So they're showing interest in a particular solution to a particular problem that they're having. So you need to land on a page that forces them to have the same messaging between the two, but does not force them to restart that journey, because that's just going to recreate a bunch of friction that you don't need and don't want, and likely just going to abandon. So a dedicated funnel is going to allow you to maintain that context of that ad all the way through conversion. And you can speak directly to the specific pain point that triggered the click in the first place. And I think that's why it's really important to have a ad and a dedicated landing page for that ad. The messaging needs to align. And so guide them through that streamlined journey. Designed specifically for whatever entry point you had.
So there was another part of your book that I thought was particularly interesting. And because as a digital marketer, sometimes you think, okay, well, the conversion has happened, I am done. But you say that there's a lot of work to be done to foster retention and repeat purchases. How should digital marketers view that information that you present?
Well, I think that unfortunately, most brands forget about that phase. They just ignore that phase. And I think that that's really, really sad because after a conversion point happens, if you want to be a sustainable, especially direct to consumer brand, you really need to make sure that you have a viable customer lifetime value. And the only way to get that is to meet the customers where they are after the purchase. How can you do that? Well, there's a lot of different ways, but there's also a lot of different expectations a consumer had. So the first thing you can do is meet those expectations. What does that look like? Well, for one, don't immediately ask them for a review, right? Oh, hey, you bought something. Instead of thank you, it's almost always, what'd you think? Right? I mean, there's so many tools now that put that in the Shopify checkout alone that can create problems, right? So what I recommend is that you follow a pretty simple process. The first step is to confirm the order details, right? Send them an email saying, here's your order. We got it. Everything looks good. If not, let us know. The second is to provide shipping updates, right? Pretty simple. Let them know right away what to expect, when to expect it, if there's delays, etc. That can solve a lot of customer service issues to begin with. Then from there, provide them with information about the product as it's coming. So there's that waiting period between when they purchased and when the order arrives that can really introduce regret, right? Somebody can say, I didn't really need that. When it gets here, I'll ship it back, right? So now's your chance to reinforce. And that is done through providing helpful content, maybe how-to videos, how they can prep for something coming. If there's, a really great example of this is we've worked with a lot of outdoor brands. They have tents that are notoriously hard to set up. So giving them a video, here's how to set up your tent once it arrives. Here's the pieces that should be in there. If you have any issues, just contact us. We'll help you. But we recommend you watch this video and understand it before you go camping. Pretty simple, but helpful, right? Once the product arrives, wait a couple of days because the brand should know based on tracking when the product arrives, and then do a follow-up. Hey, is everything okay? Any questions, etc.? We're here if you need anything. Lastly, then at that point, ask for a review. So wait a couple more days, maybe a week, ask for a review. Give them time to use the product. And then only at that point should you add them onto a more generic mailing list. So there's quite a cycle that could happen after somebody purchases, but most folks skip to the end. They immediately put them on a marketing email list. I'm like, why are you telling me to buy more from you? I haven't even gotten the first product. Why are you asking for reviews? I don't know anything about this, right? I haven't gotten it yet. So I think really your job is to understand at this point what a consumer is going through after they purchase and meeting them where they're at.
Jon, so many great tips. Thank you so much for joining us today on Closing Time.
Yeah. Happy to be here. Yeah.
If folks would like a copy of your book, I think you might have a special offer. We can put a discount code on the screen. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So if you wanted to get a copy of Behind the Click, you can go on to thegood.com/BTC for Behind the Click. So that's just pretty simple. thegood.com/BTC. And in checkout, there's a little button that says have a coupon code. Put in BTC podcast 50. So BTC podcast 50. And with that, you'll get 50% off an ebook, or if you want a physical book as well, happy to have those sent out as well.
Well, thank you for giving that offer to our listeners, Jon. I feel like we could talk for hours, but I really do appreciate you being on the show.
Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thanks to all of you for tuning in to Closing Time. Remember, you can get this episode delivered to your inbox. Just click the link on the show notes, give us your email, and you will get it. And we will see you next week.